And just as a reminder for those of you who are joining that we are recording this meeting. So don't say anything bad about Lynn, we're recording you.
How's it going?
It's a very quiet hello and frog in my throat. Linda, are you able to give me permission to present for when the time comes?
Yes, yep.
Thank you.
Looks like we have enough people to start, and it's 5:34, so.
Okay, if we're ready to get started, I will start the meeting. We are recording. Okay, welcome everyone. Today is Thursday, September 9th, 2021, and we are here for the Revere High School Building Committee Project Meeting number 18. The time is 5:35. Linda, would you like to take a roll call, please?
Sure. I'm waiting for,
Thank
there's
you.
somebody else is arriving right now, so let me just wait and see who that is. I know Michael Picardi is absent today. He is traveling. He did let me know. We have Mayor Arrigo.
Here.
Excellent. Do we have Stacy Bronson Rizzo?
Stacy's away.
Okay. Thank you. Susan Gravelisi.
Here.
Excellent. Dr. Kelly.
Here.
Excellent. And Carl Svensson. I don't see him. I'm not sure who the last person is coming in. Dr. Perella.
Present.
And Jennifer Hayes.
Here.
Rich Viscay.
Here.
Excellent. Don Ciaramella. Don't see him. Nick Rystrom.
Here.
Jerry Visconti.
Here.
And Patrick Keefe.
Here.
Excellent. All right, we're going to jump into our agenda. And first order of business to vote for approving last meeting minutes or meeting minutes from August 26th that were sent out earlier today or yesterday, apologies. And I can share my screen if just for reference. So again, these are the meeting minutes from our last meeting on August 26th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from August 26th.
Excellent.
I'll second that.
Thank
Second by
you.
Susan.
And we will do another roll call for approval. Mayor Arrigo
Yes.
and Susan Gravelisi.
Yes.
And Dr. Kelly
Yes.
and Dr. Perella. Jennifer Hayes.
Yes.
Thank you. Rich Viscay
Yes.
and Nick Rystrom.
Yes.
Jerry Visconti
Yes.
and Patrick Keefe.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And we will go on to our next agenda item, which is putting in a motion to approve August invoices for left field. I don't quite yet have Perkins Eastman, so no scrunching time for you, Dan. So we will have to, move forward with presenting the August invoice for left field for professional services for OPM services for the month of August. And then at our next meeting, we will present Perkins Eastman. for August services. So this for August, it's the same amount of 21,000 that we've had monthly for previous 9 months. So this is invoice number 10.
Would anyone like to make that motion? Dr. Kelly?
Sure. I'll move that we pay the invoice to Left Field for August in the amount of 21,000.
I'll second.
Excellent. Thank you. And I will do another roll call for the approval of continuing to move forward with Left Field invoice in the amount of 21,000. Mayor Arrigo
Yes.
and Susan Gravellisi,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Dr. Perella,
Yes.
Jennifer Hayes,
Yes.
Rich Viscay,
Yes.
Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
Jerry Visconti,
Yes.
and Patrick Keefe.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I am going to then stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to move on to our next general project update, and I am going to make Robert Bell the presenter. And I will...
Brian, did you have anything before I start, or I'm going right into options?
So just real quick on just a little bit of housekeeping. I know that with all these online meetings, it's easy to use the chat and everything. I want to encourage the committee to interrupt us if you have a question. It's challenging to incorporate anything that's in the chat into meeting minutes and the public record. I'd also like to double down on members of the public who are attending, especially if we're going to need questions or comments. Those are going to have to come at the public questions and comments point, and we will need folks to identify who they are. So it's just a general reminder for everyone. Committee folks, jump in whenever you'd like, but I don't want to get sidetracked with some ongoing public questions as we go through the presentation. I'd just like to hit it at the end and see if folks have questions then, and we can get named for open meeting law reasons.
Okay. Everyone can see my
Brian,
screen?
Just to add to that, Brian, I see there's one person right now who's not identified. It says waiting for name.
Oh, I missed that. Jeff, if you could identify yourself, that'd be great. If not, I think.
Actually, I think it might have been Amber.
Okay.
Looks
Sounds
like
good.
Amber's still there, it looks like. I think the person left.
It looks like the person left.
Sounds good. I think, Bob, you can take it away for now. We'll keep our eye on it.
Okay. So let's see, just wanted to start with where we were last week before the vote. We had 11 options on the table. At the last building committee meeting, there was a vote to remove the ad reno options. They certainly added a lot of complications. They didn't seem to have benefits. Were not better plans. We also had the successful vote to remove the 3-story options, and as a result, what we were finding is the 4-story options were all proving out to be better in some way. I think we were surprised because it not only is a smaller footprint to relieve the site, but we think educationally they were working out a little bit better too. So that leaves us with the 4 options that you see here. We had the Aracola Park 4-story as well as a flip version. We had the Wonderland 4-story option, and we had at this snapshot the Revere Housing Authority 4-story small plan. That's only because the option for the expanded plan that we previously showed was technically a 3-story, but we know that that should still be under study. So what we've done is added a couple of options that we're going to walk through tonight. So in addition to the 4, we added we did a study of expanding the property around Aracola, around the existing high school, to see if that would result in real benefits, and so we'll share that with you. We also, in an evolution of option 3BA, we found that flipping the building actually worked a lot better for the fields. It really seems to be the right thing, particularly as we look at the small version expanding into to utilize more of the site and to have fields and other supporting landscape around it. So that option has evolved. The 3BA option has evolved to flip, and then you'll see we have an expanded site version of that. The other thing that we wanted to do was to get a little bit more consistent. The more we've been hearing comments and flushing out what the program should be, we wanted to make sure that each one of these options is illustrating the expandability capability. It's always possible to build the steel so that you can go up a 5th floor if you want, but we first try to see if we can expand laterally on the site, reserve that space so that you aren't kind of pigeonholed in the future. And so we've done that, and I'll explain what that is. We also regularized the parking counts. So we know 650 is a lot of cars. Until we get into the final design, we're trying to make all the options equivalent to each other. So you'll see that we have maximized what we can put as surface parking, and then we've included the equivalent underground parking to get each one of these options up to the 650 zoning regulations. We also, for some of the sites, we wanted to make sure we're really clear about future crossings and pedestrian paths, so we made sure that that was worked in or refined into the site diagrams. The play fields, we heard the comments earlier on to make sure we had, for example, a baseball field rather than a multi-purpose field on just the Revere Housing Authority site. And we've also made sure that the tennis courts are equivalent for competition purposes, showing 5 courts at all sites. So you'll see all of these things updated in each plan. This is an overview. It's now 6 options, and you can see the first 2 upper left and middle are Aracola. This uses the existing site. It's pinched, as we've discussed before, between the shape of the site and the culvert, which is a dotted line on these plans, which sort of forces this wedge shape into the building. As requested, we had looked at the flip version, which is 1CB, and we'll show you some land studies that look at 1CA and 1CB if we were to acquire more properties in and around the site, what that does. And we also produced a new option, 1D, as I described earlier, which does take some of that adjacent land. Down at the bottom left, again, this is the refined version of the Wonderland site. There's really the option for the main entry here to be both from the north side, which is deep into the site, but also from the what you would call the right-hand side. So we've got a little arrow denoting that. There's the flexibility in how you enter the building, so it can address the parking and also include longer car queues. And then the revision to, right in the middle bottom, revision to option 3BA, which is really just a flipping the building around. And then the expanded site 3B. So those are the 6. I'll spend a little bit of time zooming in. You can see this is pretty much as we presented before, with the exception of keeping track of the delta. We have 395 surface parking spaces, and so that means the remainder would be going under the building. We've highlighted the approximate area. It doesn't mean it necessarily goes underneath the classroom wings, but you can see we've got a blue dashed outline that shows the approximate area that we would be required for the parking. It may be that it it goes to the front of the building, or it may be that we have a drive that comes around the side of the building here to get to that. You can see the 5th tennis court has been added. And otherwise, some of the things that we've talked about on this site remain. It is a little tight, a little pushed up to the highway. You can see that the synthetic field and the ball field are really pinched pretty tightly between the access road and what would be retaining walls to the south, which is the number 14 denotes retaining walls. So a little bit of concern there. We're pretty tight. You really don't want a field that kind of runs into a wall. These are all diagrammatic at this point, but you can see the constraints we're dealing with. Next option is the flip version. Pretty much the same conditions on site, 5th tennis court, pretty tight fields. In this case, the entry is off of American Legion Highway, and you can see it's got limited circulation up front. We're showing that as the bus drop-off. The academic wings are highlighted with blue dotted line, and that would be underground parking to supplement the 350 spaces that are on the surface. This one, you'll see when we get to the pros and cons, doesn't seem to be adding value. In fact, it really kind of separates the face of the building from the fields and the parking. The parking is around the back of the building, as you can see. So what we did is we looked at looking at the Aracola and taking several portions of land. You can see here the black dotted line represents the existing site, and there's a little bit of area to the northwest that if several properties there were acquired, it would allow us to use the existing roadway as the inlet into the school. That also gives a little bit more buffer space for the fields and allows some additional parking to come in. Likewise, taking some of the properties to the south, excuse me, I may have said south before, but right here to the south, including this large triangular piece, would allow us to again increase whether it's parking or the building. This was just a study to show what we could do keeping the existing. We don't actually think of this as an option, but more as a study. And you can see the natural, we would hate to see these properties taken only to be used for some landscape or parking elements. The logic here, though, was that maybe you want to keep the building off of those properties so that you can ensure you can start construction while maybe the land is being secured. But I think we all believe this next option, 1D, would be the best use of any acquired land. You can see the building is able to better utilize the site, create a better kind of interior condition with the heart of the school. It moves a little bit off of the highway, moves inboard a little bit, and creates a lot more pleasant outdoor learning landscape and spaces for the school. In this case, we're able to, again, increase some of the surface parking and definitely provide relief to the fields. Actually, in this total, you can get 650 spaces on the surface. So that would avoid a structure. The next update on the Wonderland site, you can see here we've modified the building. The entry could be, as we're showing here, from the side. It could also come in a little bit more from the north. The administration is right in the middle, so either one of these could be the main entry. Here we were also able to technically get all the parking as surface parking, maintaining the separate bus and car loop, and again, the 5 tennis courts and the 2 fields. Here we're showing, just suggesting some pathways or connections to what might be the crossings. There are 2 natural points where if there is a future rail station and or any kind of pedestrian crossing built over the rails, it seems like it might occur at the end of the existing street up here in the north corner of the site. We have not consumed this triangular piece of land for the school itself. thinking that that might be reserved for future rail station. And certainly we'd be connecting with pathways. We're not sure what the roadway network or the parking might look like, but something that we want to make sure we reserve the space for and provide at least pedestrian movement. A second possible and likely crossing is over here, number 16, where it aligns with the back of the hotel and Amazon Center, basically what might be an access way to the road crossing on American Legion Highway that would basically connect to the site in this location. So pedestrian pathways that would bring you around into the front of the building are acknowledged in that. And then the last couple of options are showing the Housing Authority site small version. So this is what it would take just to build the building. Underground parking, including parking underneath synthetic turf field. So technically we would get field space as well as the parking and the building in a kind of a consolidated footprint. Here we get 300 spaces that are surface, but that's including what's underneath the turf field. So it is still structured parking. There are 75 kind of roadway parking spaces, and the rest would be underneath the building. Again, you can see here the prior plan was flipped. There was really, unlike the other options where the flip was important to how you approach or access the site, it's really not a driver here. So we really think of this as an improvement to the plan. We want to make sure that we're connecting the gymnasium to the field space. Field space would be up on what would be the second floor, and that's exactly where the gymnasium is. So it works out quite nice. And then the expanded version, same footprint, same connection to the synthetic turf field. Here you can see the site now shows, in addition to the building, an additional ball field. And we've gone through and done a little bit of a study to see how some of the housing units, including senior living, might be phased or constructed on the site to reduce the number of units that might need to be located off-site. And that's something that we can go into in a little bit. But I think before we do that, kind of ran through these at a high level, but happy to take questions. I'll say before any questions that we're updating the pros and cons on all these options. It used to be that the 4-story was considered advantageous in being a consolidated footprint. Now that they're all 4-story plans, that's been taken out as a factor or consideration. What I found interesting as Dawn and I were putting these together is that if you move, for the most part, if you move left to right on these options, you can see the positives tend to grow and the negatives tend to shrink. That's not really a measure entirely of a preferred plan because the comments here aren't necessarily equal weight. It's just an interesting observation, and I encourage everybody to, we'll make sure that we get this in everybody's hands as an update, and we're happy to learn more what should be some of the criteria that we're evaluating these options by. Are there any questions on the options before we move into the housing unit phasing?
I have a question about the structured parking. So originally when you did the estimates, the last go round, was there any plug or anything in there for structured parking, or that would all be additional cost for all the options that have structured parking?
I think the quick answer is they'd all be additional cost, if I'm not mistaken. And the goal.
Any order of magnitude?
I don't have one tonight, Joe, but it's more based on the understanding that we have to meet the zoning count, which isn't exactly how we were proceeding before. It's something that we've learned. The zoning count is up near 650, and the goal is to try to get all these near to it. I think our best bet is to estimate these items in the coming month as we're looking at the costs for these, and then have a discussion about deducting that cost and going for a parking variance with significantly less parking than the zoning requires. So our assumption right now is that we have to meet the zoning, or we have to at least design to meet the zoning, and it would have to be a decision of this committee to go underneath that and have to go for a variance for parking.
So the zoning count is 650. What's the desired number in terms of need?
The school would have to tell us that, but when we've gone through it, it's been hit the zoning and increase what's there.
For magnitude, I believe there are 438 spaces that exist.
Correct.
That's right.
And that we've been functioning as a bare minimum. That's about more where the early studies were at. But the zoning is significantly beyond what's on the existing site.
So Joe, it also might help to know that, so as we continue to develop these, obviously those costs, as Brian is saying, will be factored into any decision making. We're also looking at, with two of the sites, both the existing site and the Wonderland site being within the floodplain, we've been talking to our civil engineer on what that might mean for the structure. We think it means any building on the existing site might have to raise a couple of feet for the first floor level, and at the Wonderland site it might be closer to 5 feet. And so the costs of doing that will also need to be factored in, along with what it means to put underground parking in, the waterproofing, pumps, whatever
Yep.
that entails. So.
Thank you.
Brian, does the number that you just stated for the number of parking spaces on the existing site, does that include the spots near my office and the spots along the side of the building?
I believe it does, yes.
That's all spots on the site right now.
Okay, thanks.
Brian, or at all, this is Patrick Keefe, by the way. And I don't know if we answered this before, and I wasn't sure if this was related to funding, but I know that we're all very quick to say, you know what, 4 stories make sense. Is there a point where we might even look into 5 stories? Is that not okay? Is that not acceptable with the funding from the MSBA? Because ultimately it's a space crunch no matter where we go, and we're a city that's land poor. So is that something that's even feasible, or?
I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Okay, I can field some of it. I figured you'd want to weigh in too. I can say it's not, the MSBA won't weigh in on whether you should or shouldn't do 5 stories. They deal with urban districts and a lot of different conditions, but we know that some of the considerations are that 5-story would trigger us into high rise, which is a different animal. More importantly, I think what we find, and we're already finding at 4 stories, is that there's a fight for the program that needs to be on the first, if not the second floor. And at some point, we're kind of already tapped out on what makes sense to go vertical. Certainly could be studied.
Is that due to accessibility, or is that just?
No, not accessibility. More, the more we shrink the footprint, the less we can stack on, on top of things. You can imagine the gymnasium. We've already got it the second floor, and that's a 2.5-story space. So you can't. It takes multiple floors before you can even build on top of it, and then it's a whole different ballgame as far as stacking the program logically. And we've got a lot of big spaces, and we've got a lot of spaces that really desire to have ground level access.
Okay.
It's tough.
Gotcha.
I could also add, I think educationally, a 5-story building creates challenges in flow of students, even things, evacuations, things like that. I think for me, in my experience, a limit of
Yeah, I mean, obviously that was one of the big things that I was thinking is, every story takes a little longer, but you look at it and you say maybe you could have each wing was actually a floor, the freshman academy and stuff, et cetera, But I was just trying to think outside the box a little bit. I'm sure you already did though.
No, Patrick, I appreciate it. We've batted it around, but it is that triggering the high-rise part of the building code will force you to spend a lot of money that you're really not getting much back. Just as examples, it'd be, pressurizing stairwells, et cetera. So There's a whole lot of stuff that comes in when the code defines the building as a high rise that would be a cost premium that you're not going to feel a benefit back from. So I think that's stacked more with the design and layout parameters or the limits for how tall the building goes. There is no specific connection of funding, just for the record. It's MSBA would not penalize a building for going taller if it needed to, if that was the right preferred solution.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or I can go back and, look a little closer, but
I have a quick question on 1D. How many properties were you looking at along East Mountain Ave? And I think I don't know if it's School Street where there's additional properties, but do you have an idea how many properties total?
Yeah, what you're looking at here is about 34 properties on this diagram. So 34 outside of that thick dashed black line and to the edge of where they have rendered. 34 with just a put a approximate the assessed value of those is around 16 to 20 million of those 34 properties.
And is that a max number? Like, is there a number of fewer properties that would maximize some of the space, or is this kind of a 34 or nothing scenario?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's a 34 or nothing because of the benefits that this scheme would get out of, first off, being able to kick the entry road down School Street a little bit. That's relieving a whole lot of pressure at the front of the site, but knocks out that whole line. And similarly, over in this triangle area down on East Mountain, unless we get all the way up to East Mountain, there's going to be no real good way to deal with the grade changes there. And we really start chunking up where we have space and not have space. So I think as far as, we originally on this site looked at a whole bunch of different combinations of eminent domain going even on the other side of RMA, but this seems to be the only one that, I'm not advocating for it. We're not advocating for it over or above any other options, but this seems to be the appropriate study for if there was going to be eminent domain to really relieve the pressure points on the building design and the site design. This seems like it would be the, I know it still sounds like a lot, 34 properties, upwards of 20 million, but this is, I guess, what I'd call the Goldilocks scheme for this. If we go much less than that, we're not going to be able to get these large chunks. We're not going to be able to as effectively use the grade. And going more than that, you're really just adding field space. This gives a different ability to lay out the building and site circulation with this amount.
Got it. And then on the pluses and minuses slide, I noticed that the large RHA, 3BB, has a replacement of 84 units, and then the small version has 154 housing units. Are those net replacement numbers?
That's probably a good segue. That may be based on slightly earlier information. So we had that's something we're just about to jump into if we want to go there.
Okay, yeah, we can.
No, good eye, Mayor, and that's sort of where we're going next. And just to preamble some of this, we're going to go through the work that Perkins Eastman did to figure out the jigsaw puzzle of who would need to go off-site, what type of units, and how could we phase on-site. They did some really awesome work there. We're then going to talk about schedule a little bit. Both of those, I think, put us back in front of the Housing Authority Board in the next coming months. So a lot of this is just ideas. I just want to throw that out there again. All this housing relocation is not sort of under the purview of this project, but the ideas that Perkins Eastman sort of have showed here are going to set up a time frame of when this would all need to happen. So we're sort of doing the thinking. We're just not in control of the potential housing replacement project.
Quick question. touched on eminent domain. You refer to the assessed value. Is that what the taking requires, assessed value, or is it market value? And if it is market value, is there a big difference?
That's based on multiple assessments. I mean, if we go eminent domain, there'll have to be multiple assessments done. But then it gets into a debate about value. So it can only go up, Joe. It's not going to go down. But if we do decide to do eminent domain, we're going to have a range in the budget. For right now, when we vetted eminent domain for previous options, we applied basically assessed value plus about, I think it was 20%. And arriving at that upwards of 20 million is using that same logic. So for at least now, we're using the logic of assessed value plus a plug factor. And that's going to be in any scheme with eminent domain. But the honest answer is we cannot be really held up with eminent domain schedule-wise. The value could go up if people have valid arguments to increase the value. So we would always have to approach eminent domain in the budget as a range. It will never be a defined value until we start doing the takings.
Dan, you want to take us through this?
Sure thing. So this is just an overview of the residential units in the housing authority site now, and it just basically tells you how many units in each one of the areas and what types are that would have to be relocated. We'll go to the next slide. This is a kind of a snapshot of the total affected area if we go with a larger scheme. So that would mean that out of that property area, 280 of the existing units would be affected in some way, or need to be either relocated on the site or relocated off the site in order to get enough land to build out the high school and the fields as we're showing in the full site build out. Go next. This just breaks that down a little bit further. So you can see that the different areas. This is phase 1A. So phase 1A is basically the first move we would suggest making. And what we did was we looked around the site to see if there were any little open pieces of property, undeveloped, or areas that where people didn't live. The 11 unit, I'll go from right to left. So the little 11 units over there is an area where there is land that the RHA has that is undeveloped. And we figured we could develop a small kind of apartment style building in that spot, which would create 11 units. There's an open spot, 4 units. There's a little open spot there where we think we can put a little building with a 4-unit building. The 40-unit building is a 4-story senior living building, which we would suggest there's a 4-unit underneath there, plus the maintenance building. If we take those 2 buildings out, you could build a 40-unit senior living building. Up at the top, where the 18 units is, there's enough land between the Cushman Avenue senior living units and then the units behind them on Coolidge, where we would suggest that we look to develop 18 townhouse-style units in between them, so that we have. So this kind of gives us a bunch of property, a bunch of units to move into of different types to start moving people on the site into. Let me go to the next one. So in phase 1B, you would move all the seniors off of the Cushman property, which is the top one there, not that area, but the one where this says 1816, that one. So there are 16 units there of senior living, and that would go down into the new 40-unit building, which is on that one. And then the 20 senior living units, which are down on Proctor, those would also move into that 40-unit new building that's already built. So that would clear that piece of property where those 20 units of senior living are and allow us to build yet another senior living building of 44 units. The other properties that are along Constitution right now in that stretch, those would move into the new 11-unit little building all the way on the right, and the little 4-unit building, and the 18 units up by Cushman that we had built in the previous phase. The ones that we removed on Cummings, those senior living ones up there above the 18 we had built, those could now be demolished and replaced with 18 more townhouse style units. And below, we would be on Cummings, we'd be able to build another 22 to a little, maybe a few more townhouse style units in that area. So at the end of phase B, what we would do, this phase, we would be able to relocate all the rest of the elderly units that are on that are in the actual high school building area, move them over into the new 44 unit senior living building. And then we would be able to move 40 units of into new townhouses and 9 units into new apartments on the site. That leaves us with only 84 units that are unaccounted for the entire site. So that means we've accounted for everybody except for the 84. So it cuts that number we had originally talked about of 154, which was what we thought we needed to move, to 84. One of the reasons why you see there's a differential on that earlier slide that Bob presented of the 154, if we only do the small piece, we don't have the opportunity to start building all this stuff out. So it's a 154 because we're only building out the high school spot. And that means everyone who's on the high school spot's got to move. But if we start soon and we're able to start building out pieces and making things that are buildings that are a little bit more compact and a little bit have more, especially the senior buildings where you're able to take a stretch that has 16 and a stretch of 20 and put them in one building, that gives you a lot more opportunity to relocate on site. So it really very much decreases the amount of offsite that you need to, and at the end of the day, that you need to do. So we're down to 84 instead of 154 in the larger scenario. And that's the end game. That's the end drawing right there, showing the new high school with the phase 2A area, which would be that part where off of Coolidge there, which in the end we would relocate Coolidge. I think there's one more slide past this. Yep, where we realign Coolidge so that it pushes away so that the baseball field can go in there. And then that finishes up the phasing of the project. And I think this also allows you to do all this at one time. You really could combine, there is a possibility of combining 2A and 2B into one final site phase.
And the big
This
thing
is just a little summary
that we, we'd like to sort of vet this idea, and then we're going to be running this through some of the folks that Mayor Arrigo has working with us. I think a refined version of this idea is probably what should go to the next Housing Authority meeting, and we really need to get some sort of temperature reads on if this is one way to skin the cat, so to speak. It's just we needed to vet, is this possible, and how many people would go off site. Dan, you sort of alluded to schedule, and we don't have the schedule for all these phases laid out in a nice graphic way yet. But if this multi-sequence that's on the screen right now were to be able to start in earnest, call it January. I mean, like, team together, funding, get people moving, get some, real version of this design going, a real process going. The schedule should be pretty similar to what we presented to you for this option at PSR. And as Dan alluded to, if somehow all of this phasing could kind of get going at once instead of breaking out a little, it's possible that this can get done without pushing out our project significantly into the future. So we wanted to backwards engineer this from, is there a physical solution, all the way back to when would all that need to start? And the short answer for when it would need to start is basically now. But project would really need to be launchable early next year, and otherwise our schedule just sort of slips out into the future. So we're going to try to capture that all and gauge the city's reception to this, the housing authority's reception to this, so the schedule we put in front of you, we believe, is reliable.
And Brian, remind us, you alluded to the schedule you had given initially. Can you remind us what that was for this site?
Yeah, let me open it up. Give me one minute on that, and I will find it.
Were you going to share that, Brian? I can stop.
I can do it. I can just sort of verbally, because the other two options we had were very similar. I just have to, I forget where I saved it.
Can I ask a question while you're looking that up? My understanding is that the housing authority is probably in need of repair or investment. How much does that factor into it being seen as a site, since it's going to need some investment in resources anyways?
I get the question, John. That's probably a question that I think is a little bit like the housing authority and the city might have to chime in. I think we have heard that you know, this place ultimately is going to need generational work one way or the other. But I don't have a much more specific answer for you.
I had a question while we're on this topic. Will the current residents at the housing authority be displaced while the new buildings are being constructed for their living, or will they remain where they are, construct the new buildings, and then knock down the existing?
The idea was to try to keep them in place until we get to the phase where we need to start building the main building. And then we need to, so I would have envisioned that we would be building the 84 unit building somewhere else, and that this would all happen on the site, and everyone would stay in place, and they might move within the site during the phases, but they wouldn't be off the site until we start construction in the main building. And then that 84 units, those individuals who are left, they would have to relocate to a new building elsewhere.
So this does have all of these people being relocated, but not into temp. So either depending on by unit and by how the housing authority wanted to do it, the grand scheme would be right now 84 people moving off-site to a new public housing building in Revere or buildings, and the remainder of the people basically have a construction site spring up around them on most sides. And at some point, they're going to move from their existing unit right now into one of those new units, and then we'd knock down the old unit.
Right, okay. And there'd be varied types too.
So they wouldn't be displaced twice. They wouldn't have to
Correct.
move during construction.
Once.
So that would be
Yep.
for elderly that.
Yeah, we think this has been very beneficial to the elderly in these buildings, because they would get a building that's much more akin to independent living.
Right.
Going back,
exactly.
sorry.
It's probably worth noting that there's turnover every month in these units, especially with the elderly. Unfortunately, when people pass away, there are units that are vacated and updated, and people are relocated. So somewhere in this equation, we may want to consider the fact that some of the units that are in the location that we're looking to potentially use may be vacant, and I don't know how that would shake out with regard to lost revenue for the housing authority or whatnot, but there may be some potential just by natural attrition to move some of these people as well.
It would be good in this to have a little bit of flexibility like that, because we're down to like we're down to individual unit, making sure each individual unit is accounted for. So it would be good to have a couple of units flexibility that are empty, so we don't end up in a situation where somebody doesn't finish, one of these projects doesn't get finished on time, and then we're in a bind. So that would be helpful.
Quickly going back to Dr. Kelly's question. And these will evolve a little bit as we refine these schedules and put the final budgets for this phase in front of you. But the Wonderland and existing site options, we're all still pretty confident that you'd be talking about a move into the new building in summer 2026. The assumption with the versions of the housing authority, so again, that's Wonderland and existing site, even if existing site includes eminent domain. Housing authority timeframe was basically 2 years after that. So fall 2028 was the goal. The idea would be that we had control of the housing authority site enough to start building the high school by the end of 2025, and we would be able to have that building open winter 28-29. So about 2.5 years longer than the Wonderland or existing site is what it was in the last phase, and I think that's going to pan out to be the case for this phase as well.
And Brian, is that timeline just for phase one?
Yes,
And then
that's
phase
getting,
2 would happen after that?
no, so
No. No.
no, that would be the whole kit and
The whole
caboodle.
thing would be one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
able to do it with these maneuvers. You're able to do. You really can do phase 1 and phase 2, being the building and the field adjacent in one shot. It's one of the nice things about it, is that it really does allow you to clear the whole site the way for the final build out, rather than doing it, breaking it into pieces.
And we
And
did,
what
Dr. Kelly, have one schedule for what was the initial thought of the entire housing authority site. That schedule did go out to 30/31. So that schedule's out. That no longer exists. It's not going to be shown for any of these options. At worst, we're talking to move into the new building and construction complete on the housing authority site, winter 28.
And what was the Aracola Park timeline?
Aracola Park and Wonderland, we think we could be in the building in summer 2026. However, keep in mind that there's a year and a half of site work after that. So in the new building for Aracola Park and Wonderland, have site work afterwards. That's something that we're going to refine a bit. So those projects don't end in 2026. The building's open, students are in there, and then based on scheme, we have other stuff to do. But the way the housing authority site's looking, everything done end of calendar year into winter 2028.
So full project completion on all 3 sites would be around fall of 2028, maybe a little bit earlier than that for Aracola Park or Wonderland.
Yeah, that's fair to say. So we'd probably, the last thing we end up doing is we do an audit of the whole project with MSBA. A lot of things have to be done, including a 10-month post-occupancy survey. We have to be done with all site work. So we were projecting project complete, full project completion, building committee shut down in fall of 28 for the for the Wonderland option and for existing site. I think the audit would be the only thing that goes out into 2029 for the housing authority, because if we're going to move you in, call it around the holidays 2028, we then just have to wait 10 months to do an occupancy review and do the audit. So fall 2028 for the audit, project completion, existing site or Wonderland, probably a little more like summer 2029 audit completion. But building move in summer 2026 for existing site in Wonderland, and fall winter 2028 for housing authority. And we will be refining those and putting some graphics in front of you. It's just the sequencing that Dan walked through is we need to vet it out a little bit with the city and people to understand do we think that could be done in one push? Is it 2 pushes? And if it all can be done in one push, we can probably rock those dates back into pretty tight alignment with the other options. But it's a complex series of musical chairs, and the important thing for me is that there's a process moving towards a real project there, or not. And we're going to go through some schedule stuff in a couple of minutes that sort of push the decision we're asking this committee to make out into the end of November. And what we really need to do between now and then is vet whether this idea and this phasing on a high level is the idea valid, and would the city embrace it if this project gets selected? And on a micro level, does everyone agree with how we've set up the musical chairs, and what order would we go about them? That allows us to put a schedule in front of you and say, there's a plan behind that schedule. It's not just an idea.
Can I add one caveat to this? All things obviously are not equal here. One of the factors I think that needs to be considered is that Aracola Park will also come with it lots of educational disruptions, especially with building around the school. I've experienced that. It has an impact, at the very least, the movement and the parking. And I think that is significant and should be part of the considerations.
Yep. Wonderland's the only unoccupied site. That's the only place we're going to be out of everyone's hair. Otherwise, we will either be completely in the school operations here or completely in the housing authorities here for a number of years. And that, you're right, John, it is that it should be factored in.
Dan, I have a question. It looks like the replacement housing is fairly low rise. Is it restricted in some way, or are there options to actually build up?
I'll take that one. The only way this was going to get embraced from the housing authority was not to go high rise. So that was something that was loud and clear from the housing authority when the mayor and I visited. It was sort of a straight out, if the idea is to put this all into a 12-story building, the answer is no. Replacing these units somewhat in kind, they're townhouse units. The vast majority of these would need to be townhouses. Those are the operating sort of parameters that we're functioning on here. Some of those details do need to be discussed because we're still suggesting here taking seniors out of more townhouse row housing and putting it in a 4-story block building. So those are all, we just assumed we were going to get a hard no if the answer was take everyone and put them in a high rise somewhere. That's what we were told, Joe.
Okay.
Yeah, the 2 senior living buildings, like that's a pretty standard typology for that to be like 3-4 stories with an elevator and units on each, a certain number of units on each little community on each floor. And then that little 11 unit building is also like a smaller kind of low slung apartment building, but the rest of them are townhouses.
I do wonder, to Joe's point, like, I know they wouldn't want a 12-story high-rise, but might they be amenable to a 6-story building? Or, do you know what I mean?
My impression is no. I'd like more input on that, but and that's why I want to get in front of them and ask more questions. But my impression was townhouse or bust. So I feel like we're pushing it a bit with this, and which is why I want to get a reaction from them. I'd like to bring this presentation and Dan to the next RHA meeting and run them through this and see whether this can be embraced or pushed back upon. But we sort of feel like we're pushing it as far as our initial read allowed us.
We also felt like the typology in the neighborhoods surrounding the fabric of the neighborhood surrounding it supported the closer, more dense townhouse kind of housing. But there aren't a lot. I mean, that big white building on the bottom there, the bottom of that one, that's a larger scale building, and that's why we kind of felt building that senior living building was not out of character for that area. And the one over there is not really out of character, but I would putting larger buildings on this site might be a little bit out of character with the area that it's in.
Yeah, and I'll just add that one of the points that we heard from the housing authority when we went last month was the fact that there was some anxiety around the idea that we were gonna take all of these units and then just build a big box and put everybody in it, and that's what Brian and I heard very clearly. So that was a rumor that had kind of been swirling around in some of the board members' heads as this was going on, and some of the rumors that have been kind of thrown out there in the community, and that's certainly obviously not what we're looking at, and was never an idea or an option for us. But there may be some room for additional density to be created, but I think this is a good first step towards getting back to the housing authority to talk to them about the idea of creating on-site housing that we can move folks into.
Great.
So Mr. Mayor, I will follow up, but just so this committee knows, I'd like to make sure we're on the agenda for the Housing Authority meeting and sort of run through these same slides and get some Q&A out of them, bring it back to this group in the coming weeks. Any other
Rich,
options?
when is the next meeting of the Housing Authority Board? Do you know?
Thought it was the 3rd.
Either the 15th or the 22nd.
No, it's the 15th. It's the third Wednesday. It's the third Wednesday of every month.
Okay.
Okay, I actually thought it was, yeah. Stupid me, I counted the weeks wrong. I didn't realize that was the 3rd. I thought the 3rd was the 22nd. All right, I'll be in touch with some folks to see if we can get on that. Bob and Dan, was that most of what you guys had?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think that's it.
So if we transition into a quick schedule update, we can still go back to any of this stuff. But Linda, if you don't mind, could you let me share screen for a sec? And let me close some windows. Okay, I will, this is just something we've been working on today. It wasn't in your packet. I will email it around. I'm going to get it as big on the screen as we can here. We'll also turn this into a little bit of graphic for next time, but I wanted to, high level here is we're proposing to push back submission of the PSR 1 MSBA board meeting. They basically meet every other month, and these on the approval stage that we're at now, this next submission will include picking the project, and it will go to the MSBA. It will a subset of this group and your consultants, Left Field, Perkins Eastman, will attend what's called a facilities assessment subcommittee meeting at MSBA. That's basically a meeting where we present the study, present how we ended up on the chosen option, and there's a bunch of sort of Q&A and critique from the MSBA FAS meeting. That board, the FAS, then makes a recommendation for the MSBA Board of Directors to approve the project and move us down the line. So we think that for a number of reasons, instead of on the left here is the current schedule, on the right is what we're moving towards. We basically were having you a month from tonight, month and a week, vote on the final option. We were going to continue with updates on the options for the October 7th meeting is when we were going to have a lot of financial data and the pretty looking schedules sort of laid out again so we can compare where these moves are and where project completion is. That would have got us all the way into the December board meeting. What we're proposing to do on the right, and I'm going to zoom in even a little more, is to stick with options update and really kickstart this discussion with the Housing Authority and the city this month to vet the real feasibility of all those musical chairs we were just looking at, how they would be funded, when the projects would start. That'll allow us to sort of dovetail it into a schedule for when this project can get control of that site. October 7th is a meeting date for this committee. Go through the updates. We still stay on the trajectory of showing you finances and estimates, updated estimates and schedule. And early October, we're proposing that we have a little discussion about what I'm sort of calling a little tour back here in the green in this added area. I think that generally speaking, we need to get these options up to the point that we had them at the last go around, you know, with budget numbers, with schedules, and we need to get that information out there. I think you folks will also enjoy having that information floating around for a month or two as you're making a decision before we ask you to vote. So I don't think we need the triple meeting in October. I think we meet at the end of October to basically present what we'd call, you know, the final study. This is what we would have been showing you back here on October 7th here, final options. That doesn't mean you make the decision that night. So I think we bring these options all up to final. We have a comprehensive presentation that we vetted. Maybe some of these ideas we've talked about get incorporated in them. And then one way or the other, we not only do you folks have time to digest that and talk to people, but we go on a little tour. I think we would be in front of the Housing Authority again. I think we should be in front of them for the next 2 or 3 months until this is either chosen as the option or eliminated as the option. I would suggest that we also think about getting in front of the City Council, and we think about doing another public forum. We were always going to do one more public forum. I think we should spend September and October getting these options all up to snuff answering the inevitable questions about cost and schedule, which I know everyone needs to know. We're just sort of working them out live, and bring all of that information around the city, get in front of any board we need to, get in front of the city council. Maybe the school committee needs an update, Dr. Kelly, I'm not sure, and ask you folks to pick that option on November 18th. December 2nd, we'd have another meeting to submit this whole report to MSBA. That gives us a little bit of sort of collapse time in here between these two dates if we need to, but the December 2nd vote to submit this decision and the report to MSBA will give the team time to consolidate it, bring all the narratives together. This is another 2,000-page document, so we need some time in December to get that together. That would get us to the January facilities assessment subcommittee meeting and the February board meeting. So sort of is a 2-month pushback from what the original target was. And we've been telling you this was an aggressive schedule right out of the gate. I think this is a move that's essential, not only to just vet some of the live items we're talking about now, but to buy as much time as possible to work with the housing authority in the city to really figure out how valid that option is in the housing relocation plan. It's still, you know, still a decision within a couple of months. So we have a lot of information we have to put in front of you, but I just think that if why I wanted to throw this out there is the challenge for us on the team and the challenge for the city is to, by this November date, understand if that housing relocation is a feasible process or not. Because if on this date we pick that project, we need that project to succeed. We need that project to be real. Otherwise, all of this work is lost. You'll basically have to go back to the beginning of the MSBA process. So we think buying the September, October, and potentially November RHA meetings, another 5 to 6 weeks worth of meetings with the mayor's crew on Mondays will let us get this housing authority option as far along as it possibly can be. And I hope come November 18th, we're all looking at what we all believe is a real option. If something, if the wheels fall off the bus between now and then, this option might have to be viewed differently by the time we get there. But we really need this process to get buy-in if it's going to succeed and you're going to be able to make a decision in November. Any thoughts or questions on the schedule? And again, we'll lay this all out into some meetings. We'll break it down into what we're asking you to do at each meeting. But the general idea here is present to you all the detail that we owe you by the end of October, and sort of a little bit of an outreach tour through the last week of October and the first 2 or 3 weeks of November to get as much input as we can on the decision we're asking you to make. That was all I had.
Brian, I know, I'll just jump in real quick. I know we've been meeting on the Mondays, and they've been helpful. What would be probably good for us to get a sense of what are the, between now and November 18th, because I do agree that pushing the schedule makes a lot of sense to make sure that we get this right. Between now and then, really knowing kind of the either decisions that need to be made between the times that we're going before the housing authority or before we're going to the city council or anywhere else, but things that you may need from the city to help guide the building committee, items that have to be kind of ticked off. If we have a good list of those, given the time crunch that we're under, it'd be helpful to tick those off and have them, and we can talk about that in detail on Monday. But I think that may be something that we can talk about and help facilitate, so that we're not letting time pass us by, especially in these critical moments.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. That's great thinking, Mr. Mayor. And I've held off on sending a draft email to that Monday group, because the more I thought about it, the more I'm shuffling it down into almost a checklist of, if we're gonna get to a real answer, here's a checklist. Rich Viscay, this is what we need you to work on. Folks from the school, this is what we need you to work on. So I think we're trying to turn that into a checklist style game plan, and that'll be ready for prime time before Monday, and we can go through it with the Monday group and then bring it back to the next committee meeting and just sort of review, because there is some homework things along the lines of budget and et cetera that we've talked about that do need to dovetail into some of this. So point taken, and we'll organize that for everyone.
Okay.
If there are no other questions, that's what we had for the planned agenda tonight. And I think otherwise it would be going into new business if no one has any additional questions.
I think, Brian, maybe we want to go through item 5 of public comment, if there is.
Yeah. Mhm.
If there is any public comment. I see one name that I personally didn't recognize. I might just have had a really bad memory, but
Public comment, again, we're going to do verbal, and we need a name and address if anyone has any comment.
Yep, and actually, Mr. Ed Terrell is doing exactly the right thing. Thank you very much, Ed. His camera is, he apologized, his camera is not working. And he just put in the chat that he is at 70 Seawall Street, Revere. And Ed, if you have a comment, feel free to speak up, unmute, or continue through the chat. So reading through the chat, is there a way we can add 2 variables measuring inequality and equity?
This is a little bit why I don't like chat questions, because I don't exactly understand how to answer that.
I think I would need more information about that question. A little more clarity on what the question is.
Ed, does your microphone work even if your camera doesn't?
I'm guessing that the microphone might not be working either. He says, I'd like to see how these projects are impacting inequality and equity across the city.
That doesn't feel like an OPM question to me. Sorry. I honestly, for us, we're designing this building for the entire student population of the city, and I hope I'm not sounding like I'm trying to be short. I just honestly, it's the high school. It's not one of a number of middle or elementary schools that just serve one neighborhood. So my view of it has been that it is for the whole city, and I just need to maybe chat it out with you a little more to understand how you mean the question.
And I guess I can take a little bit of a stab at it, Brian. Like, I know, Ed, a lot of what we've talked about is ensuring that the building that we do build is fully accessible and has programming for all students with all different kinds of learning needs, whether they're English language learning needs or special education needs. And we did talk about this in a couple of our previous meetings, designing the academic wings around neighborhoods where kids are fully included in all of the academic programming. And so that's going to help us ensure that there is equitable opportunities to learn for all different kinds of kids, regardless of, as Brian said, they're coming from all over the city. But so that their social economic status or their special education status or their English learner status does not inhibit their ability to participate fully in all programs that we offer. And when I think about how the siting of the building impacts equity, I do think about things that we've talked about as a committee before, like the challenge that students who walk to school will have accessing a school building at the Wonderland site, which is landlocked by highways and a railroad system. And so for them, there might be a little bit of inequity if the building is constructed without that in mind. So if we end up on the Wonderland site and we're not thinking about crosswalks and overpasses and traffic mitigation and all of that as part of this project, then kids who only have an option to walk to school would be disadvantaged. But I'm thankful that this group has been very much focused on all of those aspects as we think about the different areas and the different places in the city that we might be located. And I don't know if that addresses your comment a little bit.
I think the response was, okay, sorry, his microphone is not working. So that's why we have to
I even
do this
think I
the hard
understand the
way.
question a little more.
Yeah, he did confirm. Yep, that explains the question. Thank you for trying to answer my question, and thank you for all the hard work the committee is doing. So, technology aside, I think we've come through the public comment. I don't see anybody else. Thank you very much, Ed Terrell, for your question, and thank you to the team for responding. Is there any other new business discussions that anybody would like to add for today?
I think one question I just want to pose to the group is, and this is more for the folks, the members of the building committee, if they have any concerns or any things that are kind of gnawing away at them about the project. I know we're kind of in flux at this point with our options. Everything seems like a really difficult decision at this point. But are there any kind of outstanding concerns that members may have about the project, about anything related to the project?
I had a question. If the housing authority is not in favor of redeveloping and putting more housing right around the surrounding, what may be the new high school, if that's the chosen site, is there any other option that's been thought of where these people, they're elderly and veterans, where they might go?
My answer to that is going to sound a little bit procedural, and it's that ultimately the option that this project pursues, the contract with the MSBA, the rules of engagement state that not only do you need to own the site, you need to have legal access and clear access to the site. Exclusive use is the term they use. So to me, if the housing authority does not agree to participate or consent to this development, I do not believe there's any move the project could do. I think that removes the site from potential. I do not believe an eminent domain action or something along those lines would work. I think it has to be the project gets exclusive use of the site through agreements with the housing authority. That's the way I view it. Somebody with more knowledge of how that law might work could disagree with that, but in terms of our agreement with MSBA, they're not going to put a dime behind this building until we can demonstrate that we have exclusive use of that site.
I have one concern with the Wonderland site, only because of the lost opportunity for the potential new growth and tax revenue that site could otherwise generate that will actually help pay for this project. So I know with the housing authority and the existing Aracola Park locations, there's not a lot of lost revenue per se, but I think we really got to weigh in the lost revenue of any potential development of that site when we're weighing these three locations. And I don't know where that comes in or if there's any pro forma ideas on what could be developed there otherwise, but it's going to be really critical for this city to maximize its new growth and tax revenues to pay for this project. So we just got to be mindful of that.
And I'll just add, because I was at that last Housing Authority meeting with the mayor and Brian Dakin and Rich Viscay. And I just want to remind us that we had talked then about adding another member from the Housing Authority Board to this school building committee. And if there's going to be a meeting next week, I just want to put that back on the radar that we, if we have a favorable outcome at next week's meeting, and it seems like that's becoming a viable option, we should do that sooner than later.
Yeah, I agree, Dr. Kelly. And apologies, I forgot to mention that you were there. I think I said the mayor and I were at that meeting earlier.
no,
But
don't
I
worry
would
about it.
love to at least get somebody assigned to answer the phone when, who can we talk to? And work out. So I would love to either have them assign someone or just knight somebody that we could work with. That would be a good outcome of next week.
I think Rich and I can find the right person.
Agreed.
Yes. That should be the agenda, I think.
So I'll throw one final question out to our consulting team, and I haven't been on these calls, and I apologize for that. But at this point in time, is there, one or two major concerns that you all see with the project and where we're at right now, and what you foresee between now and say even November in getting to the MSBA?
I think the housing authority and housing relocation is number one. I think the next big step is getting fresh numbers on all these options, and then doubling down with yourself and Rich on the financial projections we've talked about. Because one of the things this committee needs to hear is that any option they're considering, the city can afford, the city is behind it, the city knows how they're going to get the money behind it. So I think those are number one and number two. The housing authority one is a little more out of our control than just homework. We need to get them involved. But I will say high level compared to other projects that I've been on is I think this committee has a harder decision than often comes along. I think a lot of us thought at the beginning of this process there was no slam dunk, and a lot of work's been done, and I still think there's no slam dunk. So oftentimes by this point in the process, I think a more obvious solution has identified itself, and those committees get away with a little bit less stress, a little bit less of a high wire act, but you folks aren't going to be afforded that opportunity. This is going to be a hard decision, and if you have concerns or questions, sort of like the mayor's getting at, get them out there in these meetings, reach out to me. We will address them. We will find a way around them, or we will say it's something that is a detriment to the project. So this is not an easy decision. There is no slam dunk. And we all have our work cut out for us on this. So I'm not sure if that really answers the question, Mayor Regal. Yeah.
No, it does. Okay.
And I'd echo that over just to Bob. Bob, is there anything as far as development of options in the building, following through in the ed plan, MSBA comments, and anything jump out at you as mission critical, need to make sure people are on it?
No, I don't want to contradict you, but we work in a lot of communities, and I think that this one in some ways is moving smoothly. I agree. It's a tougher decision than most committees have to make. I think we can see by the MSBA comments that, things are happening when they should. I'm very thankful of the school leadership in all that they're asked to do, and I think everything's been happening in a very timely manner. I only ask for more input on, what we can do for outreach. You all know the community better than we do, so we're always looking for better ways to get information out. It's every single project I've ever worked on, there's a contingent that never knew it was happening, no matter how much we push outreach. So hope all of you are a bit of ambassadors for that, but I think it's been going well. It's a great team. It's been a pleasure to work with Left Field. I think it's a pleasure to work with the city.
I thought there was one. The only thing I thought about this is that it's unique in the way that you have a project here that can transform your city, which is different than a lot of the projects we work on. We don't, where Brian was saying a project like the project pops up and everyone says, well, that's the right thing to do. It's tougher here because you don't have a lot of land to work with, but you really do have a very unique opportunity here to do something very, very transformative.
And I'm going to jump in on what Bob said is all of you folks, whether we're in the school, whether you're from the city side of this, be thinking between now and the next meeting where that outreach should go. So I do want to do another public forum. Should we get in front of teachers again? Should we do an update to the city council? Obviously, we will be in front of the housing authority, but ambassadors is a good word, Bob. I'd be thinking about that. And I think between the next meeting and 2 meetings from now, we want to have that little that tour established, and we can tweak presentations for who needs to see what based on the final presentations. But be thinking about that and come back to this meeting with some opinions on. I do think we should get in front of this group. I think we've done a good job with these other groups, so that'll only help between now and when you need to make the decision.
Okay, any other comments or new business, anything anyone want to add? All right, then if that's the case, would anyone like to make the motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
Oh, go ahead, Rich.
I'll second yours, Dr. Kelly.
All right. Motion made by Dr. Kelly and seconded by Rich Risquet. Okay. And we will do a roll call to close things out. Mayor Rigo
Yes.
and Susan Gravelisi,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly
Yes.
and Dr. Perella,
Yes.
Jennifer Hayes,
Yes.
Rich Risquet,
Yes.
and Nick Rystrom,
Yes.
and Jerry Visconti.
Yes.
And I believe we lost Patrick Keefe a little bit earlier at a couple of minutes ago, so I'm going to note him as absent. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.